News, views, voices of the global Indian community. India abroad.
I'm just so deeply impressed by the work. You want me to step up? All right. This is where he wants me to step off the stage and fall off. But I'm so impressed by the work of Indiaspora to make Indians and Indian Americans and people from all over the world who have Indian heritage have that sense of collective identity. It really means a lot. So I really appreciate your work. I appreciate the work of Indiaspora. I'm very honored to speak to all of you. And like MR in his own certain way, I was given strict instructions by Sanjeev to give you some gyan on the U.S.-India corridor, U.S.-India economic and trade and strategic relations. So what I will offer you, and MR will hardly appreciate this, is the bald truth. He's more handsome, he's got better suits. So here's the thing. U.S.-India relations for a very long time were candidly terrible, you know? And I think about going to India in the 70s and hearing all of the grief and the flack from people directed toward the United States. I heard it in the 80s, heard it in the 90s. I started my professional career. My very first interaction on India in the US government was an absolutely disastrous Foreign Secretary dialogue with my boss at the time, the Undersecretary for Political Affairs. And I was so kind of bereft, having organized the event, that my boss said, "Don't worry, Atul, with the Indians it's always like this. We have terrible relations." So that was 2000. That was almost 25 years ago. We disagreed on everything. The entire agenda from start to finish, the only thing we could agree on is that we would serve tea at the table. That was it. And I feel very privileged that I was able to work on India fairly consistently from that point. And if you look at the concerted effort of Americans and Indians, government people, politicians, people from all walks of life, to try to breathe some positive impetus into U.S.-India relations, the amazing thing is how far we have come in the past 25 years. It is nothing shy of remarkable. When the U.S. and India sit down nowadays and they put together that long agenda, it is about all of these areas of convergence and agreement. So for instance, one early area of convergence after 9/11 was counterterrorism. And we were very much of the opinion that we were on the same side of history and on the same side of this issue, and that we shared fundamental values. That led to a very great outcropping of cooperation on counterterrorism, the Homeland Security Dialogue, the Counterterrorism Joint Working Group, a whole lot of intel stuff that we can't talk about. But that also then led over time to another realization. And this was a realization that was keyed to the very terrible Indian Ocean tsunami, which is that we, the great democracies who are active in the Indo-Pacific, can do a lot together to help other countries and to advance freedom and well-being throughout the entire Indo-Pacific. This led to the U.S.-India East Asia dialogue, which led to the Trilat with Japan, which led to the Quad, which has led to what is essentially an Indo-Pacific compact of understanding between Delhi and Washington. It affects big things and small, a whole range of technology cooperations, and even the other day when there was a terrible landslide in Papua New Guinea, the first thing the four governments did was get on the phone together and say, hey, how do we work this out? Japan, Australia, India, the United States. And that cooperation in the Indo-Pacific is now being mirrored, echoed by an increasing convergence between Delhi and Washington in the Middle East, where there's a growing apprehension about the pillars of stability in the Middle East being shaken, and that Washington and Delhi having a stake, along with our allies and partners in Saudi Arabia, in the United Arab Emirates, in Israel, we have a stake in the stability of the Middle East. There's 7 million Indians there. That is also an area of convergence. Now, what do I work on? I'm the president of the U.S.-India Business Council. I'm very privileged to lead a tiny but mighty organization in India and the United States that was essentially founded by both the U.S. and Indian governments to serve as the principal articulator of policy ideas that would help smooth the path of trade and investment in both directions for the betterment and happiness of the American and Indian people, the two greatest democracies on earth. We've been at it for 49 years. Next year will be our 50th anniversary. We have 7 different policy verticals related to digital economy, where the United States and India lead the world very proudly. financial services, energy, aerospace and defense, legal and professional services, and a whole new committee called Farms, food, agriculture, retail, manufacturing, supply chain. What's amazing about this particular element of U.S.-India work is that it has been jet propelled since the pandemic by a deeply shared sense of mutual trust. We had a hard pandemic, the US and India, the great free open societies, and we learned some lessons from it. One of the most important lessons, and I saw it with my own eyes in my last years of service in the US government, is that we do trust one another. Our people trust one another. There is immense affection and admiration between the American and Indian people. When we needed help, India came to our help. When India needed help, we came to their help. There was no doubt, no hesitation, and that has led to an extremely promising area of cooperation on just about every deep tech and future tech that you can imagine, where if the great democracies don't get it right, then we will all be diminished as a species. And we have to ensure that America and India and our companies and our innovators and our scientists work together in a productive way to ensure a citizen-driven, democracy kind of constrained future for humanity in things like artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, quantum computing, defense production, outer space research, and much else besides. And this is where American and Indian companies come into play, because we don't have giant state-owned enterprises in the most part. We have private sector companies, and we have world-class innovation and talent in both countries. And when you look at the world from my current perch, all of these big companies, whether it's our Indian members and they're world-class Indian companies or world-class American companies, the brains powering it is very largely Indian. And you see that in Silicon Valley, in Palo Alto. It's like right in your face that US-India cooperation on these critical issues is going to pave the way for the future happiness of the world. So it's a great privilege to work on these issues. There is so much we do together, and I am convinced that there's no limit to what we can achieve together. But I want to issue, or rather mention, one problem. Our economic relationship is underpowered. It has not yet hit its potential. When I went and took charge of the embassy in Delhi in 2021, I had the whole strategic set of the embassy tell me about all they were doing. And I was amazed at how much they had achieved in the years that I had taken a detour to Sri Lanka and East Asia and working on China and other stuff. The amount of stuff that had happened in the counterterrorism, intel, defense, diplomatic, etc., space, hard state stuff was amazing. But on the economic side, it was all complaints. It was all worries. It was all worry beads clacking. And I realized that the economic relationship is truly underpowered between the US and India. We should get to 500 billion in trade as soon as we can. We're at about 200 billion. With Mexico, we have 800 billion in annual trade. It's important that the great democracies, the two greatest democracies, put some ballast in their economic relationship. And that is the work of the US-India Business Council, and we welcome all of you to work with us to try to advocate in a respectful and constructive way to both governments ideas, thoughts, suggestions, inputs, feedbacks to try to achieve that potential, because it's important for our two countries, it's important for our 8 billion people, and it's important for all free people everywhere. So thank you all very much for the opportunity to speak. Thank you, Sanjeev. Thank you, Amar.
Atul, thank you not only for the work that you do, but for being who you are, because we have a reciprocal relationship between USIBC and Indiaspora, and I don't mean that in a transactional sense, but genuinely as partners. You partnered with Indiaspora on our G20 summit last year in New Delhi, and then we had the pleasure of partnering with you at your annual event here in DC. So delighted to have had you. Thank you. Moving on now, I'll invite back to the stage someone who really has been present at the creation of Indiaspora. Like I mentioned, he's become a mentor, a friend, philosopher, and guide, and really is a tremendous powerhouse in many, many circles here in the Indian diaspora community, whether it's business, politics, culture, and so forth. Shekhar, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sanjeev. And thank you, Amar. Thank you to the team, which I just can't believe that in 11 years, Indiaspora has come from someplace upstate New York to someplace here at the National Press Club. It's been quite a journey. So look, I'm going to continue quizzing you a little bit because, you never know, you might get it right. They did get the number of congressmen right, and congresswomen, by the way. There is a woman in the ranks too. So how many US senators have been Indian American? One. Oh, not bad. All right. How many governors have been Indian American?
Two.
Two. All right. So I assume you all know who they are, of course. And then how many state representatives and state senators do you think we have? There are, by the way, 8,000 elected offices in the United States, roughly 4,000 at the state level, 4,000 at the local level. So again, 1.5%, right? You keep hearing the number 4,000. You should have
160. 120.
It's about 48. Okay, we like to take pictures with presidential candidates, with US senators, with US congressmen, and we, by the way, do give them a fair amount of money, disproportionate to our, however, for whatever reason, and Kandan doesn't have to say anything here, we don't spend that much time thinking about school board, local city council, mayor, and the next person I'm going to introduce, Aruna, can talk about this. This is where the rubber meets the road. Not everybody can be president, there's like one, right? Not everybody can be governor, there's like 50. So why is it that we don't believe the ladder belongs just in our own communities, doing our thing, providing that? That's how other communities have really built the bench, if you want to call it that. That's how other communities have created the ladder, that other people go into a city council meeting and they see someone look like them. Okay, I can do that too. It's great to have senators and congressmen and someday a president, but it would be extraordinary to have not just 48, but 120 or 160 people in the, in the houses of representatives. The first two, by the way, who went into the state representative ranks came from Ohio. Can anyone name that person? J. Goel. And Kansas, of all places. Raj Goel. Now imagine this. They were running in districts where they were like the only Indian family. There were no other brown people there. And they ran for office because they were just inspired, they were young, they were also stupid, and they said, I gotta run for office. And they did, and they won in places that there weren't very many Indian American votes. And again, the person I'm going to introduce can give you that story too. You don't have to run for school board because there's just like a lot of Indian Americans that look like you, talk like you, or you can smell the food when you walk by their houses. You have to run because it's a passion, because it's something you think can truly make a difference. Very brief history, which includes questions yet again, because I can't let any of you fall off to sleep before dinner. First Indian American ever elected what year? 56. And who was it? Dilip Singh Sond, California. And believe it or not, it was in 1955 that a non-European could become a citizen of the United States. Until then, you could not be a citizen after the 1922 Supreme Court ruling. Of the United States, you could not be a citizen unless you were of European origin. It's only been since 1955. And then, when do you think we all came? Because we all came to this country with either an F1 visa or something else that allowed us to enter this country and then stay. There was something called the US Civil Rights Movement that was not initiated by Indian Americans. There weren't very many of us other than those that came in 1860 to 1888 to Yuba City in in the valley, Central Valley of California to farm, which still exists, by the way. The first Indian faith house of worship was built in 1882 in Yuba City, California. It happens to be a Sikh Gurdwara. And then in 1956, Dilip Singh Sond, who was denied a position on the Orange County Board of Supervisors because he was not a citizen, gets elected to the US Congress. He is a clean-shaven Sikh, and he took off his turban, and the story his son tells you later, you can go listen to sometime. It's a great history. His bust is now in the United States Congress, because when Nancy Pelosi was the speaker, she said, here's something really iconic, that there was somebody other than from Hawaii and New York that came into the Congress who was not white, and immediately after citizenship access. In 1965, Lyndon Johnson, at the spurring of Martin Luther King Jr., signed the first Citizenship and Naturalization Act in the United States. And because of that, they lifted the quotas for Asia above that in Europe. And until then, I think legally 80 people from India could apply for immigration and come to this country. It's now close to, 150,000 probably. I'm talking on a permanent basis. And when you go back in history, you realize we rode on the backs of that civil rights struggle. Let's not forget that. We didn't get here because, I know we're smart, I know we've done well, but what do you think the poverty rate in the United States is? People who live below a certain threshold, which right now is close to 24,000. It's 6%. Indian Americans have the highest per capita income in the United States. What do you think the poverty rate for Indian Americans is?
6%.
6%. Just a note. That means we have a bell curve too. And there are plenty of people, at least I know from my son's point of view and his children's, he worries about that too. He thinks the reason to be in public service is we're not yet perfect. Remember, we do not have a perfect union, and we have to keep working at it. So the Indian American community has done extraordinarily well. Well, we're punching well above our weight in virtually every sector. And this report that Indiaspora put out tells you how and why. But I think Congressman Krishnamurthy said it really well. And I think you said, boundless horizons, much opportunity to do even better and even more. And I would just leave you with one small anecdote. So when my wife and I got married, and she came here many moons ago, 44 years ago, right? Somebody else would know this. Yeah. Smita would know this, I think. And she wore a sari because that's what she wore, and she had learned how to wear salwar kameez sometimes, and walked down the street. I remember in Alexandria, Virginia, everyone would turn their head, and they would say, not in a negative way, but just in a curious way. What's a sari look like? Why is somebody wearing a sari? You're not used to seeing it. Well, as you know, if you like, I could wear a sari and get away with it on the streets of Washington today, okay? But I walked into a hotel last weekend to go to a wedding, an Indian wedding, and I'm wearing my Indian garb, and my wife is wearing her sari, and we walked in, and usually when we walk into these places, and we look like we do, they go this way. You don't even have to say, oh, yeah, you're coming for a wedding, right? They go, which wedding are you going to? Holy shit, there were 3 Indian weddings going on in that same hotel. I'm like, we've made it. This is reality check. We are here. We absolutely have all this opportunity. But with great opportunity comes great responsibility. And I would just say, for all the people who have succeeded, there's a lot more to go. And so let me bring up to the stage somebody who I admire greatly. I've known for a long time. I'm much older, so I've actually known her when she was much younger. She's an engineer, so this is not something she needed to do in her life. She decides to run for the House of Delegates. She wins, which, by the way, many of the people we talked about who have been in Congress, in other words, did not win the first time. They succeeded because they wanted to. They had a passion for it. She won again, election to the House of Delegates. Then she ran for Congress, which seemed aspirational. And it was, but she raised a ton of money. She did a great job, and she came in a very, very credible second. And then she went off and started doing other things, back to her life, and worked, I think, in some political work, but also non-political work, back in business. And there was an opportunity with a young, dynamic person running for governor. And he asked her, would you be my running mate? And so, about to introduce to you the first Indian-American lieutenant governor in any state in the United States, Aruna Miller from Maryland.